I appreciate you guys joining. First, my name is Logan Herring. I am the CEO of what we call the work group, the Warehouse Reach Riverside and Kingswood Community Center. I have two special guests with me today, Ms. Lillian Singh, who is the Vice President of Programs and Racial Wealth Equity at Prosperity Now, and Byron Sanders, who is the President and CEO of Big Thought. Lillian is out of Washington, D.C. Byron is out of Dallas. So welcome to the Millennial Summit. I would say welcome to Delaware if we were in person, but this is virtual. So welcome to the Millennial Summit.
All right. Glad to be here, man.
Thank you.
So for those of you watching, like these two are two powerhouses, as Lillian would say, rock stars in this nonprofit world. I'd say nationwide. And I'm excited to be able to talk to you about our topic today, which is building high impact nonprofits of color. So immediately, my first question, and this isn't going to be a question and answer format for the majority of this. This is going to be a conversation because we know each other all too well. And I see we have about 37 participants, so or viewers, and 38 now. So the number is rising. So I expect to get some questions in the chat box as well. But first question for you, Lillian, is what is building high impact nonprofits of color? How did that start? What was the impetus of that? Please explain.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this space to be with you guys. So building high impact nonprofits of color is just what it says. Building the capacity and the strength. And frankly, I wish I could have named, and put power in the title of nonprofit leaders of color across the U.S. It started as an initiative at Prosperity Now as a two-city project where our funder, JP Morgan Chase, one office decided that they wanted to actually double down and intentionally invest in organizations across some of their footprints. And that investment really came out in three main ways. And one is really true organizational capacity building, partnership and coaching, right? A lot of nonprofits go through trainings, but they don't really actually have the expertise to walk alongside them for a few months to really get what they're trying to get off the ground. So that's a huge focus of ours. The other one is rooted in data. How do we actually create a narrative to demonstrate the need in the community to increase the political will, the emotional will, and the third area is strategic partnering with different power brokers in the ecosystem. And that data is then used to hopefully increase the philanthropic will, as well as majority-led organizations to really embrace what organizations of color need, how they show up in their ecosystems, and also just their power. So it was a project that was really focused to really strengthen and almost exclusively and unapologetically focused on building the power of Black and Brown-led organizations across the U.S.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is like your baby, right?
I did birth it 2015 in partnership with Diedrich Asante Muhammad. It's a brother who I've been working with for over a decade. Came to Prosperity Now to launch the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative. Prosperity Now is an organization that's been around for about 40 years. And in 2015, well, a couple of years before that, the board and the leadership began to make some hard decisions. And that decision was, are we going to really intentionally invest in a portfolio of work to undergird this, the idea of expanding racial equity across the U.S. And in doing so, they brought in myself and Diedrich to launch the initiative. But yes, building high impact nonprofits of color is most certainly my baby. We are now in 8 cities, working with several nonprofits in those cities, roughly 50 right now. So we're still rocking and rolling, and we're developing new designs around our methodologies and how we actually are partnering on the ground.
Excellent, excellent. So I was fortunate enough, and I am fortunate enough to be affiliated to be one of those 8 cities, and Byron is representing the other city. Byron and I are in the same cohort. We met a couple of years ago. Byron, I don't know if you were introduced to Lillian the same way I was, but I get this cold call in my office like 2.5 years ago. With like it seemed like it was one of those prank calls or spam calls.
That's right.
Like, hey, we want to help you out. We're building high impact nonprofits. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, really? Like, this sounds too good to be true. Then I started grilling her and her colleague. I think it might have been Ebony on the phone. I was like, really, y'all want to do this? Then once we had the interview and I realized it was legit, I was telling her like, all right, these are some organizations you want to partner with, and these are some that you don't. Like, don't rock with them. Lillian, am I telling any lies right now?
No, you telling the truth.
Okay.
No, man, they glad I picked up the phone. It's like, because it's.
Oh, that part. So I like that part of the narrative. So when they did pick up the phone.
Here we go.
Oh, here we go. So when they did pick up the phone, you know, a part of our process is really like, you know, touching down locally. So we recognize that there is definitely this idea of the nonprofit industrial complex, right? So when you have a national intermediary coming into a city, I mean, there's a lot of mistrust, right? Because you have a lot of national groups that go into cities and they say they're going to do these amazing things and really partner, and that don't really always happen. So they may have been apprehensive, but after our site visit, we had both Logan and Byron being like, so you know I'm gonna be a part of this cohort, right? And I'm like, wait a minute. There's a process, and a part of that process is we got to continue vetting. But, you know, really what we bring to the table is really this holistic program that centers these nonprofit leaders who are already brilliant, but frankly haven't actually had an opportunity to be validated in their ecosystems for whatever reason, or they're still, you know, put in they need technical assistant bucket. So part of our project is that we just squash that. We just, you know, we say, wait, we're going to give them the best and the brightest, you know, executive coaches that we find, and they're going to go through a 7-month process with us. So no future funder, partner, potential ally, you know, person, you know, who is not an ally can say, oh, we can't partner with them because they're not ready. So, you know, that's a part of our process, right? And so after that, you know, site visit, both Logan and Byron is like, so we're going to be a part of this. Like, we got to be a part of this.
That's true.
One of the best decisions I've made.
I cannot locate the lie there. So Byron, you know, you and I met back in DC 2 years ago. We had I think it was a 4-day retreat. Again, I go into these things with a lot of skepticism, and I was blown away. Like the first hour, I was taking notes. I was calling my colleagues back. So Byron, what was your experience, that initial, and then like overall with the entire cohort, the 2 years we've been working together? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, you know, Dallas, you know, is very different from DC. It's very different from Delaware. Every city is unique in its own way. And then also my organization is a unique organization within this cohort too. So Big Thought here in Dallas, it was formed about 30 years ago. And I am the first person of color to lead it. It's you know, it's got some mass, it's got some size down here. We work with in the youth development space.
Hold on, Byron, let's take a second and flex real quick. I'm gonna allow you the space to flex. Talk about how big your organization is. Like, I've seen your 990. I know what your salary is. So let's celebrate this as a Black man running a extremely large organization in one of the country's biggest cities. Shout out to the Cowboys. I hope we don't lose any participants off of that. But talk about, you know, the size of your organization, what you are responsible for as the first person of color leading this organization. Then you can get back into what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, brother. So Big Thought is, like I said, we have a little bit of size. We have about $10 million budget, and our total touch points, 150,000 kids in the Dallas area each year, working with our direct service programs. And then we're also an intermediary, so an out-of-school time intermediary supporting hundreds of other nonprofits down here. So part operator and programmer ourselves, and then part capacity builder and funder ourselves. They always make fun of me, man, whenever I talk about the size of my board. It's a big board, bro.
I remember that. I remember you saying that. It was like 60.
A lot of people on the board, but it's a dope board, and we're doing some real cool stuff. But you know, this experience, man, came at the right time for us, because, you know, coming in, I wasn't brand new, but I was still there. You know, it was a little fresh. And we were either going through or about to go through our strategic planning process. I think we were in the middle of it. And what was so dope was when we did that, Lillian just mentioned, she's like, I wanted to give y'all the best of the best. And they did, fam. Like when we went up there to DC, some of the, I got access to some of the best consultants. And you mentioned technical assistance. Technical assistance is a good thing when it's directed and not just assumed that, you know, this is what you need. So we got the targeted technical assistance we needed and we wanted. And that stuff is paying off. Like it's legit paying off. One of the things that we wanted was to start to get access to national footprints, to national investment from corporations. Since then, I got a brand new one to give to you. Got something hot off the presses. We ain't even announced it yet. But we're getting a $200,000 investment from Boeing that's coming through based on the type of I think capacity building and investment and strategy and storytelling that we were able to get from our homie Valerie in all of this. And so, you know, that's
shout out
just
to Valerie
one.
Lassiter.
Yes, she is magic, and it was really, really helpful. Also, the leadership investment, David Mensa with his breakthrough action leadership, like it was really, really good stuff that I told Lillian and Logan when I was up there, you know, I get antsy when like I want to go try something. So I just heard something good and I want to get up and leave the meeting right now because I need to go get on a flight back home so I cannot forget exactly how he just said that thing. But it was fantastic. And the other thing that came in this, and I know Logan can attest to this too, is to be in community with other Black leaders of nonprofits across a range. So I have a large organization. We had one sister in our cohort who was the sole employee in her organization and everything in between. And people who started off in an all Black board and, you know, blackity black organization or all Latino. And then you have people like me. So my organization, it's a unique type of challenge, how to be a Black leader of color in an institution that wasn't necessarily built for a Black leader of color to be there, right? Mostly white board, rich, wealthy, you know, the typical philanthropic structure. And then, or nonprofit and philanthropy structure. And then to be serving though, majority and almost entirely Black and brown communities in our city, low income, marginalized neighborhoods. And so, you know, when you look at that, there's a different set of challenges to work through. And there was space for all of us. And we built this bond that persists even, you know, a year and so after the program's done.
Yeah, it's not done. I was done. I'm like, when are we meeting again? So,
right.
No, that's excellent. And you have like, I remember like 60 some odd board members or something.
It was 60 at the time. We're down. We're in the low 40s right now, so we good.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I think you and me might be comparable right now. But I have 3 different boards, but that's a whole other story that we might get into. So you said something interesting, and I want to kind of shift gears and talk about that. So you talk about the philanthropic structure, how nonprofits are set up. Customarily, I know in Wilmington and Delaware, I can speak for us, is that the majority of nonprofits are led by white people, white men and women, but they majority serve people of color, marginalized communities. So Lillian, Byron, well, Lillian, on a national footprint, is that what you see? And is that part of the reason or the importance of building high impact nonprofits of color? And then Byron, after Lillian goes, I'd like you to speak like what is the makeup in Dallas? Because I know Dallas is a little bit different, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's right. The ecosystem in the nonprofit sector, irrespective of the fact that there's so many people of color who are prepared and ready to lead organizations, oftentimes aren't given the opportunity to do so. And I think a part of our process and our work is to demonstrate that there are amazing leaders. Well, let me just back up. Let me just keep it real. What happens is when we go into cities, we are always told, you know, by the current philanthropic sector that there's no organizations of color, right? And we're like, there may not be as many.
You didn't hear that when you came to Wilmington, did you?
As white-led organizations, but I guarantee you every single city we enter, we can find them because we hunt for you guys, right? So that's just, you know, that's one barrier. There's just a visibility challenge. But to answer your question directly, yes, this ecosystem is majority-led and it has been since inception. I mean, it was really created, right, as a social service anchor. And when you think about providing social services, it's about rendering power. And we won't go there today, but, you know, a part of the ecosystem.
We won't go there today?
We won't go there today?
Why not?
Okay, all right. So a part of it is really like, you know, deconstructing, you know, and shifting the power dynamics, right, in the nonprofit sector. And our work is to highlight that, you know, there is, you know, multicultural brilliance, right? You know, a lot of people look at Building High Impact Nonprofits of Color as just like Black project, but we work with Chinese Americans, Haitian Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Native Americans now out in Seattle, right? So it's a way to demonstrate that there are leaders within the ecosystem that need to be elevated, even though what we know to be true is that this ecosystem has been since inception majority led. And how do you actually make room? And the way that you make room is to begin to understand that making room means sharing power. Sharing power means sharing resources, assets, capital, etc. And that's a really touchy-feely type of conversation that the ecosystem is now finally beginning to have. And I just think it's the truth, right? Even I think about Prosperity Now, right? Prosperity Now was founded by Bob Freeman, who is an incredible philanthropist. He is brilliant. He started this organization understanding his own privilege and understanding that he wanted to provide access. And then over the years, 40 years, we were majority led. For the first time in 40 years, we are led by Gary Cunningham, a Black man, right? So, you know, I think that it is about how do you actually shift and share space. And what that means is relinquishing power and resources and ability to decide in the sorority. So that was kind of what I wanted to share there. Is that good, y'all?
Thanks. And you know, we can't be afraid to talk about anything. So Byron, what does it look like in Dallas?
Yeah, in Dallas, you know, there are a few organizations that are mass. So Boys and Girls Club down here is led by a person of color. There is, you know, we have me, and I'm trying to think about some of the other larger ones. Communities in School in Dallas is led by a person of color.
Well.
You know, and I'm trying to think about some of the larger ones, right? But then there's another tier size organization where you have a ton of people of color who are out here doing the darn thing and doing it at a high quality as well. But see, that's kind of the issue, right? Those organizations oftentimes don't get the resources. There's this dope organization called Fort Oak Cliff, led by my brother Taylor Torrance. I just recently joined his board. And you know, his work started off as like a back to school festival, but it's built into this place-based organization that's, you know, rooted in Oak Cliff, in South Oak Cliff, here in Dallas, which is, you know, 75216 is one of the most marginalized zip codes in the country. And he's doing amazing work now, but it's because I'll just be real with you. He built that out of his own, you know, blood, sweat, and tears. And he had to have some people maybe outside of the state come in. You know, he hosted Mark Zuckerberg, J. Cole came through, right? Like, so things happened, and then it kind of blew up on the scene, which then made him more attractive for other people to want to come and invest some time into. He also has some support from another majority white institution. He was incubated there, right? So there's a pathway that you have to take in order to break through that ceiling, to get that exit velocity so that you can start to get those resources come down. And it shouldn't have to be, a transformational type, once in a lifetime kind of leader like Taylor in order for that to happen for a organization that's led by people of color. And that's one of the things that we're starting to wrestle with as an organization. There's this really interesting dynamic that's happening. There was a guy who's in charge of the Dallas Foundation, Matthew Randazzo, who wrote an article in the Dallas Morning News a few months ago. And coronavirus has done something, man. It's adjusted people's lens. It's kind of buffed the fog off of people's prism through which they see the world. And folks have started to talk a lot more about what are we going to do to invest in organizations led by Black, Indigenous people of color, actually led by them in the communities. Like that, those conversations are starting to happen in force here in Dallas, and I have not heard them happen before. This on the back end of everybody starting to really recognize that philanthropy isn't charity. That's not what this is all about. Way I usually talk about it is we're the lab. Nonprofits are the R&D for how society needs to broadly change. So what I'm also starting to see is finally we're starting to get investment in advocacy, organizations that do real advocacy and policy-based work, organizing work, organizing work in Dallas, getting funding. It's crazy. We just had a $500,000 grant come from Texas Instruments Foundation to an organization called Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Like, this is not normal stuff right now. So I would have had a different answer for you about 3 months ago. But it feels like something special is happening. We're starting to turn the corner. We just got to make sure that this momentum keeps going and it's not just a flash in the pan.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are a number of things that I'm gonna put a bookmark in and we're gonna come back to, but we're gonna take a brief moment to address a question that we have for Lillian. Okay. And this comes from Candace. Do you find it more difficult as a female? To me, it's a double hurdle as a minority and female.
I'm about to mansplain it for her.
You better not. Don't do that to yourself.
So I want to answer it fairly because, so for me, I have not found it more difficult. and I'm going to be very real about it, right? I started my career not wanting to do even presentations like this, right? Because I am a doer, I am a builder, and I don't actually, I'm not a climber, right? So my elevation has come really like behind closed doors, just to be like, so that's been my experience, right? People, and I think that was part of my birthing at the NAACP, because they didn't really care. Like, I know y'all see Stanford on the wall here. They didn't care, right? It was about building the movement and working for the brand and Black people, right? So me having that culturation there, and also not wanting to be interviewed, not wanting to be keynoting and speaking, it was easier for me. But I want to be real about that. That's a challenge if that is something professionally important to you. And also it's important to understand like who your boss is, right? So I came up to this space with Diedrich Asante Muhammad, who made it very clear to everyone. So I may be the speaker, but Lillian is the broker, right? So, I think it's important when you're coming up in this space, whoever you link yourself to, that you are really intentional about the person that you're working and you're building with, and that there is mutual respect. And I would say that because I've actually credentialed myself at 38, right, and in this space, I'm honestly, I don't see the barriers, but I would name that the sisters who I have not had an opportunity to mentor, the sisters who I have not had, who haven't had the same experience as me, has certainly found it more difficult to rise up and to find their voice. And I always recommend, you don't work for an employer. It's more important who you work for than as opposed to where you work. So I'll stop there and let Byron mansplain that for me.
No, hold on.
So what she was trying to say was,
hold on, before Byron mansplains it, because I gave Byron an opportunity to flex earlier, I'm going to give you an opportunity to flex. And I see the Stanford pendant on the back, and I know your background. I know, where you come from, but just, take about 30 seconds to a minute to talk about your background, your upbringing, what you've been able to accomplish.
So we're gonna do that on here, Logan. Okay, cool.
We're gonna do that because people need to understand who we are. Because I'm going somewhere with this. Trust me, I'm going somewhere.
So I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. They call it South LA. So my mom was single parent household, working class, worked her ass off to get me through school. But I had an incredible opportunity from 6th grade to 12th grade to be connected to this private public partnership sponsored by the University of Southern California, where they took 30 students per year and they took us through this like accelerated kind of like special program. Just think about any major school district in any urban environment, extremely impoverished and extremely disinvested in. It's hard, right, for young Black and brown children to go through some of our public education systems. So this program was like, we're going to give you all the best teachers, the best resources, after school prep, Saturday academy. We're going to wrap around service around your parents, like if the light bill can't get paid, etc. But we're going to walk alongside you and provide you the technical assistance, the capacity building. You see a thread here. And we're going to prepare you for college. And at the end of it, we're just not going to say, oh, and you can go to college. USC guaranteed a 4.5-year scholarship to everyone who went through the program and met the requirements to enter USC. I decided to go to Stanford because, it just had a better ring to it. But no, I wanted to get out of South LA, right? So that was important to me to get from South LA, South Central Los Angeles, and I went on to Stanford. And with that, as I reflect over my own life, there was bridges that was built for me, bridging the divide, right? There was intentional connections between the public and the private sector that had it not been, I don't believe that I'm certain I wouldn't have been prepared for Stanford because I was the first student in my high school to go to Stanford, right? So it just, the access and the opportunities was made available through this intentional investment. And that's how I've actually built the life that I have now, the career that I have now, really building bridges in communities of color, being unapologetic about serving and partnering with nonprofit leaders of color.
All right. Your muscles are real big. You flexed on everybody. And you got two degrees you got from Stanford?
I did. I got my bachelor's and my master's in 4 years. So we had a co-term program, and I was running. I had a full scholarship. Stanford has a policy whereas your parents are poor or need blind. I graduated Stanford with no student loan debt. And they said, hey, you get finished this master's in 4 years, that's free too. And I was like, free, absolutely. I'll take that. I'll take one of those.
Wow, I'm getting chills. And I'm getting envious as I listen to you because you said no student debt. And just seeing
so I think that's a part of also how I've been able to show it professionally, right? So I don't want to, my story and like the choices I've been able to make professionally has been linked to privilege, right? And I always want to help people to understand that I've been able to take the jobs I've taken because, I haven't always wanted to, I need this next $10,000, this next $20,000. And that is real. But I think that because of my story, I've been able to have more freedom connected to privilege, which gives me more choice in how I show up.
And someone, Winona said in the chat, no student loan, that's the biggest flex. Laugh out loud. So Byron, do you want to mansplain now, or do you want to leave that alone and talk about?
No, man, that's good.
Your background.
Listen,
okay, let's talk about your background.
I never opt into mansplaining. I
Okay.
was completely kidding.
Okay.
But I am aware of whenever it does. I'm now more aware when I start to do it. So the last 3 years, just been trying to plug into understanding patriarchy and my contribution to it. So staying aware of that. But you know what was real interesting about what you just said, Lillian, is you were talking about the proximity to privilege and how you can actually, draw from that and use it to your advantage, right? Like, I think a lot of times what's really interesting is when because I know all of y'all, all three of us have had this happen at some point. You're talking to some, maybe wealthy white donor or business person. They're like, wow, man, you're just really impressive. How can we get more of you? And when I've had that question come my way, I used to just kind of laugh, shrug it off, and say, well, invest in mentoring and blah blah blah. But as I've gotten more secure in myself and really kind of recognize that we got to tell the whole story. It's I didn't grow up in amidst a ton of privileges. Like we didn't come from money. Obviously, I'm Black in America, and that carries with it all that it carries with it. But my mother was an educator. She knew where to find free stuff for me to participate in after school programs, right? Like she knew she knew the loopholes. She could find all of that stuff. She made sure that I was in theater and that I got to do track and that I got all of this stuff. Odyssey of the Mind back in the day, right? Destination Imagination, shout out. And it's, we were doing all of those different things. And then I was in a mentor program where I met a guy who told me about this private school that I went to in high school. So, you try and replicate my story, it's not a replicable model. And when I try and tell people, it's not about, you should not have to have lightning strike in order for a person to be able to live the life of opportunity and thriving that they want. And so when people ask me that question, I was like, well, we need to dismantle systems. If you really want to know, how do we create more of me? More of me exists out there. The problem isn't them, it's us. And so when we talk about kind of getting back to that point that I was talking about with nonprofits and what we're here to do, we're here to paint a roadmap, but then we got to go and loop and tie our programs and the resources that we are getting to policy shifts. If we're not telling that story, then we're not actually doing our job as in leading an organization to be an impact nonprofit organization.
Hey, so we have another question. And Byron, I'm gonna throw this to you, and then Lillian, if you want to usher behind and answer as well. But how can we address the white saviorism so prevalent in our sector?
Great.
Build a high impact nonprofits color.
That's right. That's right. No, most white saviors don't know that they're white saviors, so we'll start there, right? Awareness is probably the first thing. Here's what we're doing. I can tell you how we're approaching it. So when we went through our strategic plan, and we just built it year and some change ago, it is a 10-year strategic plan, and we have phases. We got multiple phases. But when we started off with it, we did a root cause analysis. And in the root cause analysis, shout out to Prosperity Now, because we actually used a lot of the wealth analysis reports that you all did. And you did one specifically for Dallas, and we looked at that. And what we did was we got into race. We got directly into race and economics. And this was a conversation that my board was not particularly familiar with or comfortable with when we began it. But when we rooted it on data and we looked at it from so many different angles, it boiled down to it for our mission and our purposes. The root cause of why we even exist is institutional and structural racism. And there's no other way to cut it. And we looked at Dallas and we looked at every other place. So you get two conclusions. Either there's something wrong with melanin where it affects our DNA that makes us just not successful in life, or there's a systematic problem in this country that makes it harder for people of color to be able to live the life of opportunity and choice that they want. And we talked about that whole DNA thing a long time ago. I feel like that's been asked and answered, like the eugenics thing, all of that jazz. There's some people who are a little behind, but most people understand there's nothing genetically wrong with us, right? So it has to be systemic. So if it is systemic, then let's talk about what that is. And we went through this big thing and we came up with the North Star. All youth in marginalized communities will be equipped to imagine and create their best lives and world. When we say marginalized in Big Thought, now we're saying race, then economics. And we're not making them the same thing. We're being very distinct about both. When we took it from a strategic perspective and we rooted it on data, it became one of those things that got depersonalized real quick. And for all of the business analytics and the you know, because we got business folks on our board, right? We get all the business, the analytics, and the data informed decisions. It's really hard to come up with rationale for why the data shows what it shows as many ways as you cut it and look at it. And now that this is our strategic plan, what it means is if we know race and socioeconomics are the root, we need to actually learn and interrogate what does that mean in our organization? What does it mean in your life, person who's sitting at the table who considers himself to be attached to this mission? And so we started our racial equity training rooted on the strategic plan that is now continuing. And I got a session later on today at 11 o'clock where we're starting off our internal racial equity council. So that, I believe those kinds of conversations happening in our places and spaces, and then us being open about our journey and how it's not butterflies and daffodils, and it's really hard to dismantle and deconstruct racism even in our own organizations and our own selves. I think that's a part of this process. There's no silver bullet, but I think that's an important one.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is you really started with the data and then providing education. So, you know, those white saviors who perhaps, possibly, most likely don't even know they're white saviors, they can be rooted in the real reason behind the issues that we all face now. And then knowing the reason, the facts behind it, we then can address it and begin to solve these problems together, as well as the racial equity training. My group, or my education committee, started its racial equity training this week. They did a training on Monday and Tuesday. Guess who led our training? Bianca Anderson, who was also a part of our cohort. She was a part of the Dallas cohort. Now she's on the East Coast, working out of DC with Pro Inspire, one of the leading organizations around racial equity work in the country. So shout out to Lillian. We're taking full advantage of all of the resources that you provided. I have a professional executive coach, AJ Robinson, who is also your executive coach, who you referred me to, who also did training when we were in DC. I mean, everything has been coming around full circle for us. So I can't thank you, Lillian, enough for all of this work.
No problem. I want to add one thing, you know, see, we can't even sit in like the thanks, right? I'm trying to move on away from the thanks. But, you know, I want to circle back to this question, and I want to use what Byron said is proximity to privilege, right? I think, you know, the way that I've tried to address it, even with bringing the resources to you all, is to help our white saviors understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. So, and I'm still learning this myself, but it's connected to understanding privilege, right? Because sympathy is, you know, I feel bad for you, right? I feel sorry for you. But then and that's still about, you know, that person and your reflection of that person. Empathy is you're willing to actually get out of the car, be approximate to the challenges of the people in which these nonprofit leaders are actually solving for, and sit in the darkness of that emotion, of that cloud, of that pain that's in that community. Because if you're able to do that, you're going to understand your privilege in a different way. And you'll begin to understand that even if it's not in writing a check, you have talents and you have time that can be used in service of. That doesn't mean that you get to go out and start your own program and your own this and your own that. There's already, you've been invited to a space, right, by nonprofit leaders of color. So then you have to then change your ideology about how you're going to work in service of that leader and true service, right? And that is understanding that they are the expert. They've been in the community, they've been on the ground, and frankly, oftentimes they are from the communities in which you're trying to save. So there's a level of reverence that's necessary to that leadership and to that stewardship if you're going to actually be the savior, because otherwise you are saving on issues that you have not been called to save on. So I'm gonna leave it there, but
all right, we about to go off. The chat box is on fire right now, and we were going here anyway. We're gonna get right to it because I know we talked about this in preparation for this session today, and I see a lot of this in the theme of the chat box. We don't, want people to feel sorry for us. We want real opportunities. Yeah. We need to be at the table. So this is what we're gonna dive into right now. Yesterday, I did a keynote, and the only reason why I did a keynote, because sorry, Charlie, I had to announce this, but me and Charlie were working on getting Bryan Stevenson, who's from Delaware, Just Mercy, the book, the movie, most people are familiar with it. And Bryan Stevenson, when I heard him talk, and Lillian, you were there at the Purpose-Built Communities Conference where we did a session, which is also something I want to touch on, which is social capital is more important than capital, which is often a reason why we aren't in these positions of power in the nonprofit sector. So Bryan Stevenson talks about being proximate to the work. And then I hear about Lillian, your background, Byron, your background, me growing up West Center City, single mother household, had the opportunity because of my older brother who paved the way, who paid for me to go to a private high school. I had access to certain things, social networks, resources that a lot of didn't. Lightning had to strike for me. Lightning had to strike for you, Brian. Lightning had to strike for you, Lillian, to be where you are today, so we can reach our hand, not back, but pull people with us and say, come on, let's do this together. Like, you're a part of this. So I say all of that to say, through our lived experiences, do you believe that that equips us to be more effective, impactful, and be better leaders in this work in the nonprofit sector than perhaps our white counterparts? And I don't want it to be a us versus them, but what I do see is that the majority, from what I hear in Wilmington and Dallas and around the country, majority of nonprofits are led by white people because they might have the social capital, access to those resources and those networks. However, they haven't been as proximate to the work because they don't come from those communities and don't stay rooted in those communities, as I hear Lillian saying that the white, perhaps, saviors need to be close to. So what are your thoughts on that?
Lillian, you want to go first on this one?
Lillian's writing down right now. She's about to do
you're writing it.
Her thesis statement.
So let me say this. I think that my lived experience of growing up in community, of understanding, the differences, the differences opportunity provide socioeconomically, to go into one of the most privileged, most elite universities in America, right? To understand different access and what social opportunities have provided, my peers. To then being able to parlay that into a career of working on justice issues. No one can focus on justice the way I focus on it unless you have the exact same experience as me. So I don't want to say that it's Black versus white. I think your experience is one of the things that people don't give enough reverence to. And how you actually are solving for, because I can solve for poverty because I lived it, right? I know what I needed. I know what my mom needed. I know what my cousins and my aunts who are still in South LA right now still need. Like, it hasn't changed, right? So I have a different lens and I can approach it from a different perspective because of that. And because I've seen every single hierarchy of privilege to the privileged life I live now. Like, let's be real clear. I am solidly, I broken generational curses in my family, right? Financially, economically. So that's a level of privilege, right? So I think there's a spectrum. And if you are trying to solve for poverty and you've never experienced it and you just read about it, then no, you are not equipped. That means that you need to bring up and elevate and share power and space with other nonprofit leaders of color who have both the experience and frankly, let me be real with you, they will have the credentials. We have the credentials. What we don't have is the opportunity.
Byron? Lillian just dropped the mic.
Sierra
Harris, shout out Sierra Harris, one of my team members. Sierra's saying, yes, Lillian, we're known to say that. Like, all right, you get a bunch of amens from the church. We'll pass around the offering. Go ahead, Byron.
That's exactly it. And I think it's that thing. We can't have it both ways. Too often, how many times have you heard somebody say, you know what, this person is really good, they just don't have the experience, right? They're not ready yet. But when you say, all right, I'm going to take over an organization whose very purpose is to solve the problem of poverty with people of color, you don't have the experience, right? That never comes up when you're looking at job applications, for leading an organization that's going and has its mission directly targeted toward that work. And it's a different valuation of lived experience that we broadly across society, not just in nonprofit, but broadly across society, need to start to embed. One of the things that's so frustrating is that people recognize it, but they don't name it. They're like, oh, you know what? This kid is gritty, or this young person is street smart, or wow, they just know how to get stuff done. Where do you think that came from, fam? Right. Like, really? Where do you think that came from? It did not come from my transcript. It did not come from, my GPA, straight up. It came from having to figure stuff out. It came from having to live and to survive and to thrive, right? That's experience too. And so you add credentials to that, fam, yes, I'm good. We're good. So give us the shot and you will see some amazing things happen. Now, here's the other part too. When we get the shot, you better wrap us with some supports, because you also know that we're unique. We're stepping into a space, into a place, and what happens whenever a system recognizes something as an outlier, it perceives it as a virus at times, and it attacks. So if a Black person or a person of color is going to get an opportunity to lead, you have to wrap them with support, and you have to use your privilege as one of those people who put them there and gave them the opportunity to help maintain their ability to work and to get things done. Don't hire somebody and then when they start acting Black and doing things that leverages their Black experience, you say, okay, I don't know if that's a good fit anymore. That's right. Unfair, and quite frankly, it's better that you didn't even take the step in the first place. But we need to take the step.
Y'all dropping gems this morning. We have about 10 minutes left. I'm gonna take a minute to flex because I gave you guys the opportunity to talk a lot about the work that you do. And the only reason why I'm doing it now, because I see like people I'm affiliated with, people that I know, and I want to be able to talk about this work and then kind of shift it into another part of the conversation. So when I think about the opportunities that I had in paving the way for others, I started at Kingswood, beginning of 2016, Kingswood Community Center, Riverside, Wilmington, Delaware, most impoverished community in this city. 70% of our children live in poverty. And I came in to save a failing organization. The previous ED had made some not so wise decisions. They had missed payroll, like they were about to close the doors. And I didn't do this alone. I had allies, I had people that helped along the way. I was only supposed to be an interim executive director for 6 months. 3 months in, they were like, we want you to take the job permanently. From that, within 2 years, built 2 other organizations, Reach Riverside, the warehouse. My budget's not 10 million yet, Byron. I'm up to 7 now.
You're on your way though,
We
bro.
have about we have about 100 employees. A quarter of those are teens. One of my board chairs is a 17-year-old rising senior in high school. These 3 words I have on my chest are the first 3 words of our missions: empower the community to reach its full potential, eliminate the barriers of structural racism, revolutionize teen engagement. We call it out for what it is. And when I said I wanted to make our mission at Reach Riverside to eliminate the barriers of structural racism, you couldn't imagine the amount of pushback that I got because we were calling out for what it is. Now we're at a time and place where everybody wants to talk about it. What COVID has done, ripped the Band-Aid, the mask off of all of the issues that we've been talking about for the longest time. And when we were trying to do things as a community with allies that were peaceful in nature, it did nothing for us as communities to elevate people to say, all right, we have to do something about it. But when we start tearing stuff up, and I say we as a community, as a country, that's when we start to listen. So now that we have people's attention, I'm gonna go back to the question that was asked earlier. What do we do? How do we engage others that may not look like us, but want to be a part of this work, but might often be intimidated because we are strong with how we present. Sometimes we get emotional, we get passionate. You may mistake that for anger, but if you were oppressed for 400 years and your lineage, your generations were oppressed, you'd be angry too. And I've seen memes on Facebook and other social media where white women are like, look, if someone put their neck on my son's, or their knee on my son's neck for 8.5 minutes and he died, I'm burning down every building downtown until you do something about it as well. So what's the problem? So now that we got this space, how do we make sure that those that want to be a part of this work can join us, whether they're white, Black, Hispanic, whomever? How do we come together as one community to really affect change? And Byron, I heard you talk a lot about policy work, advocacy. Until we set up those systems and structures that have oppressed us, we really can't move the needle forward. But any thoughts you have around that as we begin to like wind down? And we need like another hour for real.
All right, man, that is that's a really good conversation to have. I can tell you a few of the things that we're working on, and I'm gonna be honest with you, man. We're working on it over at Big Thought because, like I said, it's an organization that was not built. It was not an anti-racist organization from its start, and it's a different story trying to change an organization from a traditional model into an anti-racist, multicultural organization. We're literally having this exact same conversation today at 11 o'clock. I can tell you what we've done. We have created a space, and this is actually called our Change Team, and it's the Change Team, and it's based off of a model, how to become an anti-racist organization. And this Change Team is a coalition of the willing, but it's created a space for people to come in and get real about us. So oftentimes when you go through trainings, whether you call it a diversity and inclusion training, racial equity training, you're learning common language. You're trying to understand, just what things are. You're getting the same terms and all of that. But at some point, you're going to have to apply this to you. And that's the hard work, because at some point, you're going to be talking about something that involves somebody else in the room. They might have done something to you. They might have said something to you. And it will get personal, even though you're going to try your darndest to make it not. But if we're going to move forward, if we're going to be able to do what I think people are putting in this chat, which is show up as our full self, we have to be able to acknowledge things like, yo, we work at a place that has a white dominant culture. It doesn't mean we're a white supremacist organization, but a white dominant culture has different norms, different language. The space between actions convey different things. And if I didn't grow up from that, I'm from Oak Cliff. I did not know that you had to wait. This is a true story. I didn't know you had to wait until everybody got their plate at the table before you could start eating. Because where I grew up, it's like, right, the food's ready, y'all. Come get you a plate. And I did, and I ate. You want me to wait? It's getting cold. So we all just gonna wait. Okay. Right? That little simple thing, but that conveys so much. It shows like, oh, you don't belong, you ain't in the room, right? And that kind of stuff happens every day. Microaggressions happen every day, even in an organization that has race named in its mission. So unless you create an intentional team that's designed to go in and interrogate these things and start to build policies and additional training, then the diversity training that we oftentimes start with doesn't stick. We have to internalize it, and we've created a special team for it. And that group is cross-departmental, cross-functional. It's not just executives and all that stuff.
And I'll just say one thing, because we got to wrap up. This movement, building the high impact nonprofits of color, cannot move without white allyship. And creating an inclusive economy cannot move if we are ignoring poor whites. And I think that what is happening, there's an awakening around what is rooted in data, that disproportionately people of color have not reaped the rewards or the opportunities that this country has provided all races. And what I will offer is be willing to have the hard conversation, understand the difference between racial cultural identity and building projects rooted in racial equity. There are a lot of resources out there. Y'all can hit me up. I am having one of my staffers check on the app for me, any questions that you guys have, any resources I can provide for you all. I want to be available, but, just understanding that we can't move this movement forward without the support of white allies, and that's real.
And speaking of support and moving the movement forward, so while I talk and close this out, Lillian and Byron, if you don't mind, if you can type your email address or your URL to your website. I know it might be in the app, but just so people have it at their access or their fingertips. We are partnering with Prosperity Now and a couple other organizations on 2 different initiatives. Reach Riverside is doing one around a customized individual plan for each household that's moving into the new housing in Riverside, where we're going to make sure that they are economically mobile. So whether they live in the most subsidized home, in the future, they can move into a brand new home ownership unit. So they have upward mobility and economic mobility and access to that in the very same neighborhood, and don't have to move out of the hood that they grew up in to achieve prosperity. The other thing we're doing is like a microcosm of what you did, Lillian, with building high impact nonprofits of color, is at the warehouse we're working with small nonprofits of color. The initiative is to help them build capacity, back office support, help build their board and such. So, I've learned so much from you. I feel like you're my big sister. You're only a year older than me. I thank you guys so much for being with us today. We're getting like mad requests to come back and do a part 2. I wish we could. Maybe next year we can do it in person. You guys come to Wilmington. Any final thoughts? You have about 15 seconds for each of you.
Just thank you for inviting me to this space. Wilmington and everyone's connected to this summit. Keep building, and you have to do it in partnership. And thank you. These are my leaders, right? So it's like I'm a mama bear, and I see like 2 of my babies. They growing up, doing things big, leading big organizations. And I just want to remind people that when you get privilege, you have to share it. You have to leverage it, particularly if you're a person of color.
Byron,
Mama, we made it. No, but I thank you so much, Logan, for facilitating a great conversation, man. And I know we could go deep because we always do over drinks anyway. So just shout out to all the nonprofit leaders of color out there making it happen in spite of all the barriers, all the challenges. I see you. I love you. We out here together. We all made from this beautiful stardust. Let's keep it going.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all for attending. This has been a great session. Wish we had more time, but we will be back in short order. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Byron and Lillian, love you guys. Thank you.
Love you guys. All right.